This cute little girl goes to another world to save her father. The reason, for 10 long nights, Tyr waited for her father to come home, still believing the same story he always told her, that he was a powerful knight from the Taloxium Empire, a man strong enough to defeat monsters and villains. Even if they were poor, even if other kids got to enjoy things she never could, she still believed her dad would return and take her back to the life they dreamed of together. But that hope is shattered when the terrible truth reaches their home. The man she trusted more than anyone is gone, and the little girl who thought she still had time is suddenly left with nothing but his belongings and her tears. Yet, just when her world completely falls apart, something impossible happens. A strange pendant begins to glow, turns into a tiny dragon, and offers her one unbelievable chance. A chance to save her father no matter the cost. Of course, without missing a beat, she says yes. Some hours later, she's transported into a field of flowers in another dimension. There, she falls asleep and dreams about the previous night, when she wished for the dragon to save her dad. When Tyr opens her eyes, she sees a strange boy and freaks out, but after spotting the horns on his head, she calls him Kamang and realizes he is the little black dragon who wants to help her. She then looks around and sees they are somewhere else, so she asks him where and how they got there, and the boy tells her he has brought her to her dad's homeland. She learns how big and beautiful the land was before the magic stones appeared, compared to Jongno-gu. He then explains to her that since he couldn't bring her dad back to life, he brought her back to the past 7 years before she was born. Shocked, after learning she had time traveled, Tyr, who refers to the boy as Doraemon, praises his ability. But then he explains how he had used up his powers trying to bring her there and ended up making a bed for her after she had slept off. He then explains that even though her dad is currently alive, he won't know her since he hasn't met her yet, and the world is very vast, so there isn't a guarantee that she'll meet him. Still, Tyr's will remains unwavering, and she vows to find him and explain to him as long as he's alive. Tyr reveals her dad calling himself the strongest holy knight, so she puts 2 and 2 together and concludes that the knights meet at the order. With that, she grabs the little dragon and calls the order their next goal. During that period, Basto Ferrex, a wandering mercenary, tries to eat a plant but calls it disgusting. Instead, he complains about all his monster catches drying up after falling to his traps. Now he thinks about attacking a certain magic stone to draw out monsters, since the appearance of magic stones has led to more monsters. He recalled fighting a huge monster the day before and thought he'd die, but then he survived. Still, Basto calls it pointless, before choosing to head back to the order. Suddenly, he hears a sound of his trap catching something and wonders what it was, so he picks up his hammer and heads there. Moments before, Tyr complained about how huge the place was and even wanted the black dragon to carry her on his wings, but he reminded her that he isn't Doraemon and she shouldn't think about it. After all, he had used up all his power. She realizes that he has helped her a lot and then suggests massaging his shoulders, but he refuses and confirms he can't really help her, because if he had the power to do so, magic like teleportation can be traced, and they'll get hunted. Suddenly, he transforms back into the pendant, shocking Tyr, who assumes that he has done that to rest. So she picks the pendant up and puts it in her bag, while saying she'll find the order. Right after that, she takes a few steps and steps on a trap which snares her, and in the next moment, she sees Basto glaring at her like she's a meal, so she assumes she's done for. She quickly assures herself that she's okay and shouldn't cry, and this makes Basto worried because he's in a forest where monsters roam at night, and not only is Tyr alone, but she got caught in his trap and is trying to reassure him. She tells him that her dad is nearby and he should leave, and once he learns of this, he notes her dad will be in shock if he sees her. So he tries setting her free, but she worriedly cries for Kamang to save her. Basto encourages her to cry more, believing that way her dad, who is nearby, will hear her and come looking for her. Still, she continues, and Basto wonders why she's crying when talking about her dad, but he frees her and tells her to go to him. She gets up, surprised, and asks him if he won't come after her, and he's shocked by her reasoning, only for her to assume he's a kidnapper, and he realizes his appearance does match someone shady. Basto then tells her that the trap wasn't for her but for a rabbit, and she gets shocked. To prove his innocence, he drops his hammer and backs up slowly, then tells her to go to her dad since it's dangerous for her to be alone in such a place. She wordlessly looks at him and runs off, and this makes Basto worried that he even wonders if he should follow her till she meets her dad, but all of a sudden, Tyr trips and falls flat on the floor. Shocked, he sees her crying and learns that she has injured her leg. A short while later, he applies a bandage for her, and she learns that rabbit meat is yummy. But once he tells her all meat tastes the same, Tyr disagrees by saying cow and chicken taste different. As he listens to her whining, he wonders if she's a noble for her to talk about meat. Also, her cry was very loud earlier, but there wasn't any sign of anyone there, despite her claim that her dad was nearby. This makes him ask her where her dad was, and she honestly tells him that he's in a place called the Order. Shocked, noting that the Order is 5 days away from where they are, despite the forest being relatively close, Basto notes it's not a distance Tyr could travel alone, so he asks her what she meant when she said her dad was close earlier. Tyr then fesses up about her school 101 tactics to get away from a kidnapper, and Basto realizes she's not only learned but also came from a loving home. Once he remembers his family, he offers to take Tyr to the Order, so he beams a smile at her and offers her a ration of soup. She smiles back at him without knowing that Basto already planned to head there to report on the magic stone he had attacked the previous day. Like a spoiled brat, after learning the soup was made from carrots, Tyr looks puzzled, but Basto urges her to try it since she needs strength, so she man up and gives it a try. To her surprise, she likes it. Then Basto offers her another serving. There, she sees a writing on the bowl and reads it out, saying, "Daddy, I love you." She gets puzzled, wondering how she can read the letters since they aren't Korean like the type she learned. But then, she realizes that Basto isn't speaking Korean and she can communicate with him, so she assumes it's Kamang's ability. She then hugs her bag and wishes Kamang ate with her so he can recover faster and get to see him alongside her dad. Later that night, she has a good night's rest while Basto watches, and the following day, they set out for the Order. 4 days later, they arrive at the Order's first gate, but unfortunately, the guards stationed inform Basto that his mercenary identification number has been terminated, so he cannot pass through the gate. He should go back. Minutes later, Basto yells at the gate inn outside the first gate and curses Karl Warben, saying he must be behind his situation. The inn proprietress, an old lady, yells at Basto not to destroy the place. She carries Tyr and washes her up, wondering how she got so dirty under Basto's watch. The proprietress's husband shows up and is shocked that Basto's mercenary identification number got terminated. Basto then concludes that Karl must have bribed the Holy Knights to expel him. Otherwise, there was no way an identification number he used about 2 weeks ago would suddenly be terminated. Before coming to the inn, Basto yelled at the guard, informing them how he had attacked one of the 3 stones of Brio wood, which had been giving the imperial family problems, and had been asked to report it. To his surprise, they laughed him off and said the case had already been reported by the Death Hound mercenary group, who attacked it clean and neat. They made fun of him, saying he was the one trying to steal Karl's achievement, and they called him shameless for trying to deceive them. So they yelled at him to leave quietly, or they would force him. Basto immediately gritted his teeth after learning Karl had sabotaged him again. He glared at the knights, and they felt threatened by him, but Tyr softly touched him before asking him if he was all right. Her warm gesture helped him calm down, and he apologized to her before saying it would take some time to get to the Order. With that, he took his leave, and the knights relaxed after learning he was ready to kill them, so they wondered what Karl was doing with someone like him. As Basto left, he thought about where to cook his head off, figure out what was going on, and find a way to get to the Order. Currently, he wonders why the entry is blocked to prevent civilians who lost their homes to magic stones, and he wonders what the nobles and emperor are doing. Jax, the inn proprietor, immediately yells at Basto not to go that far and he should learn to control his anger to stay safe. Basto then admits his frustration because people are dying, and Tyr sees he's sad again. The geezer calmly apologizes for what happened to Banara Village, Basto's hometown. When Tyr hears of it, she calls it Banana Village, and she wonders why she's just remembering it. Once she confirms it's Basto's village, she remembers the tale and realizes she knows him. Back then, her dad had told her he used to have 20 strong subordinates who were better than 100 weak people, and the closest amongst them to him was Basto, the hammer wielder. Originally, he was a vice-captain to Death Hound, a mercenary group based in Banara Village, whose leader Karl worked Basto mercilessly. She has learned from her dad that Karl had betrayed Basto and run away alone when Basto went to attack the magic stones. Back then, Basto would fulfill all of Karl's orders with the condition that Karl would look after Basto's wife and daughter, but then disaster struck, and monsters that could only be active at night showed up during the day. During that time, Basto had gone to attack other magic stones, but then his village got caught in the onslaught, so the villagers cried for help from Karl, but the drunk bozo ordered them to settle down while he quickly assessed the situation and evacuated them. Like that, the living scum pretended to check the situation but secretly ran off. They all waited for him, but they were killed, and by the time Basto got back, he saw his dead family and mourned them. Based on the story, Basto left the Death Hound, and Karl bribed the Holy Knights to erase Basto's identification card. Seeing everything play out before her, Tyr realizes it's true. Her dad had told her that Basto, who was left alone, met with him, who was ranked the greatest at the time, and he made a new ID for Basto and told him to come along because he saw that Basto was a strong and kind person. Currently, Tyr realizes all she has to do is find her dad so he can help Basto. Unfortunately, her dad is in the Order, and they would have to go there for him to help Basto. But the question is, how to get in there? Tyr thinks about it all day, and when she falls asleep, her brows are wrinkled from all the worrying. Shortly afterwards, Basto tucks her in properly while wondering if there's a way for him to get a new mercenary identification number or to get into the Order. Even if he can't get inside, he wonders if he can entrust Tyr with someone who can get over there. He smiles while looking at her and notes that it was a short meeting. Moments after he falls asleep, Kamang comes out of the bag and notes that Tyr is sleeping peacefully. He speaks of how worried he was, but he's glad she came all the way to the Order's outskirts by herself. He then wishes to stay longer by her side, but unfortunately, He hasn't fully recovered his powers from rewinding time, and he feels pathetic about it. He then tells her to wait a little longer. The next morning, when Tyr gets up, she asks around for Basto, but the innkeeper tells her he went out early, so she asks Tyr to come shopping with her. Tyr happily agrees, and a few minutes later they arrive at the market, which is bustling and filled with a lot of homeless people. The inn's granny tells Tyr about how the situation keeps getting worse, and it's due to the large magic stones that are appearing and summoning monsters. Tyr confirms with her eyes how dire the situation is, just like Basto had told her. All of a sudden, a noble yells at someone, claiming they touched his wallet, but then the person insists that they simply bumped into him. Still, the man smacks them across the face, and Tyr is shocked by the barbarian act. It makes her remember the lady from room 203 who was always beaten up by a man every day, and notes that she was a good person. She gets mad, and appears in front of the noble, yelling at him to stop hitting people, saying it's bad. Realizing Tyr isn't with her, the granny sees her right in front of the angry noble who stares daggers into the kid's eyes. The people around them echo in unison for him to leave the girl alone, but this infuriates him the more for them acting as if they can order him. Thankfully, the inn's granny shows up and talks some sense into him by reminding him that the back alleys are full of people who have nothing to lose, so he shouldn't anger anybody in the district, or else he can end up as a corpse. Startled, he looks around and sees the commoners glaring at him, so he makes a run for it. Impressed, Tyr praises the granny, who reaches out to the slapped victim and asks her why they haven't been coming to the inn. The lady speaks harshly to her, and this annoys the granny, who scolds her and reminds her of her swollen face. She orders her to follow her to the inn. Tyr, on the other hand, is frightened and wonders if she has helped a good person. Moments later, the granny serves Tyr some food and then gives the young lady a piece of cloth to wipe her face. She complains, but the granny yells back at her, so the young lady angrily wipes her face. Surprised by her vulgar behavior, Tyr calls the young lady mean. While terrified, she asks her if she stole the noble's wallet and calls her auntie. This pisses her off, so she takes off her hoodie and yells at them that she's a boy. Tyr is beyond shocked to find out that Vale is a guy. She remarks that it's her first time actually seeing a guy who looks like a girl. Vale then cuts in, confessing that he actually did snatch the man's wallet, but that it belonged to him initially. He explains that he had paid the man earlier to form a mercenary group with him, but the man had tried to cheat him and run away with his money. He explains further that someone of his status is not worthy enough to receive a knighthood, so his next best resort is to become a mercenary and start hunting monsters for money. Tyr asks if forming a mercenary group would earn them an identification card, and Vale confirms it, but he chips in that they'd have to pass a mercenary exam first. Hearing about the benefits of a guild, Tyr suggests that they form one together, but Theo lashes out at her, calling her a brat. He asks if she knows the implications of working with a mercenary, but Tyr softly replies that she has a legendary puppet mon. She also tells Vale about Basto, who is really strong too, but Vale doesn't take her seriously. Basto then interrupts, telling him how capable he is of handling small magic stones all by himself. He tells Vale about the small Briarwood's magic stone he attacked recently, but Vale discards his claim as he had heard a different story. According to what he heard, a mercenary group led by Carl had been responsible for attacking the magic stone. Tyr then cuts in, explaining how Carl had stolen the credit for Basto's work and had even terminated his identification number so he wouldn't be able to prove himself. Hearing this, Vale is completely shocked. Basto then tells him he's going to prove his claim to him sooner or later, but that he will after he gets his identification number back. He explains that he had promised to take Tyr to her dad, who is currently in the order. It is at that moment that Vale realizes that they aren't related. Piecing together the details he just heard, coupled with the fact that they both don't look like the type to lie for their personal benefits, he decides to consider forming a group with them. Besides, having wasted 2 months trying to form the perfect mercenary guild, he concludes that he has nothing to lose. He tells Basto sternly that he has to try not to be a burden on him, or he'll be left behind. With that, they form a guild. The following day, while the newly formed guild heads over to attack a magic stone, Tyr can't hide her excitement. She envisions the task as something as fun as the curricular activities she used to engage in back in daycare. She even tries to assure the other two that she's strong enough to take down some monsters. But Basto cuts her short, explaining in detail the dangers the mission they're setting out on entails. He tells her to imagine the scariest thing she knows, and Tyr immediately thinks of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Basto then tells her that the monsters they're about to face are at least 10 times scarier than the apex predator, terrifying the young girl on the spot. After educating Tyr on the dangers of coming along with them on the mission, Basto and Vale decide to put her in the custody of Nordics, an old fortune teller. They then promise to be back before dawn as they prepare to take their leave. While they prepare to leave, Tyr recalls the things her dad used to tell her about monsters. Her father had taught her about the different kinds of monsters, as well as the various attack methods suited to taking down each kind. Before they leave, Vale teases Tyr, telling her not to cry like the little girl she is when they're gone, upsetting her in the process. Tyr then intentionally wishes only Basto good luck on the mission as they leave. On their way, Basto casually brings up his speculation about Tyr being a noble's child, but Vale debunks the theory, stating that a noble's child wouldn't be alone in the forest in the first place. While they advance further, Basto tells Vale his shocking discovery about the kind of name Tyr claims to have been given by her parents. She had told him her surname is Kim, which is a pretty strange name for a noble, especially in that era. Based on the little information Tyr had given him about her father, Basto had carried out a little research, which led him to tales about Deokpal, Tyr's father's tragic past. According to what he found out, Deokpal lost his entire family in a village and then became a wandering mercenary ever since. Before the tragic incident, Deokpal was previously the vice captain of an exceptionally skilled group called Deathhound, and based on the information Basto has on Deathhound, he knows how skilled they are, so he believes that meeting Deokpal would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. While they advance further, they notice that the deeper they go, the more the area turns into a maze. They come across small magic stones sprouting in each storage room they go through, but what they find most intriguing is the large distance between each stone. They then decide to simply attack the magic stone closer to the entrance and leave immediately. Locating the closest stone, they are taken completely by surprise, as unusually large cracks begin to form all around them. It then doesn't take them long to realize that what they just encountered isn't a small magic stone, but a medium magic stone. At the entrance of the cave Basto and Vale go into, Tyr sits in the custody of Nordics, praying desperately that they return safely. All of a sudden, large cracks begin to appear on the ground and in the sky, leaving her utterly shocked. Suddenly, monsters begin to emerge from the cracks, so Nordics is forced to protect Tyr. Given that he has some prior battle experience, Nordics holds back some of the monsters but instructs Tyr to run away as quickly as she can. While she runs, Tyr realizes that there's a high chance that Basto, Vale, and Nordics don't make it out alive. She then gets frustrated at the fact that she has always been the one getting protected, just like when her father was still alive. At that moment, she prays desperately to all the deities she can think of to grant her the strength she needs to protect the people around her. And strangely enough, her prayer gets answered on the spot as powerful skeletons begin to appear. Still in the cave, Basto and Vale do their best to stand their ground against the flocks of monsters charging at them, but can only barely manage to stay alive. Basto had scouted the same area just 2 days ago, and at that point, there were nothing but small magic stones, so the fact that a medium magic stone was able to sprout within that short period is something he finds really strange. Eventually, they both get overwhelmed by the number of monsters attacking them to the point that they start to feel helpless. Realizing that there's nothing he can do anymore, Vale convinces himself that it's better to die by his own hands, rather than being torn apart by the monsters, so he brings out poison and tries to drink it. Before he gets to drink the poison, something unexpected happens as a group of powerful skeletons sprouts out of the ground and begins to attack the monsters on their behalf, leaving them in disarray. Realizing that that could only be the ability of a necromancer, both men confront each other to know if the other was responsible for the spell, but they both deny it. They then get confused because not only do they not know the caster of the spell, but necromancy is a magic that only appeared in old legends. Shortly after, they get approached by Tyr in the midst of some skeletons who comes crying to them about how she was scared that they would have died. But something feels quite strange. The skeletons around her keep guarding and reporting details to her, almost like she's their master. That's when it clicks to them that the little girl they've been trying to protect is the one responsible for the powerful necromancy magic. Shortly after, they are joined by Nordics, who appears to be badly injured. He had also been saved by the skeletons while at the brink of death. Due to their number advantage and synchronization, the skeletons had not only defeated all the escaping monsters, leaving none left behind. One of the skeletons also reports to Tyr that they have gathered all the monster cores in the cave. When they get back to the cave, they are surprised not only at the number of monster cores they find. The monster cores are so vital to them that without them, they wouldn't be able to pass their mercenary exam. Normally, it should take them a long while to extract and gather the cores from each monster they take down, but seeing everything effortlessly gathered together in one spot feels like a dream come true. The three men then take their time to explain how rare it is for someone her age to be as powerful as she is. But all the while, all Tyr can think of is the fact that her father too was once regarded as the strongest. She then calmly replies that blood is thicker than water, taking the whole group by surprise. Still in the cave, the men ask Tyr what she means by those words, so she's forced to brag a bit about her father. She tells them that her father was the strongest holy knight, so they realize that she must have probably inherited her abilities from him. But something still feels odd about the whole narration. In their world, 2 different types of abilities awaken: holy power and magical power. Holy knights awaken holy power and use that strength in swords, while mages awaken magical power and use various forms of magic as a result. The 2 different types stand at opposite ends from each other, so there are only rare exceptions where a child born to a holy knight would awaken magical power. Superstitions even have it that in most cases, children born with power opposite to their parents often ruin their surroundings and cause disaster. Thinking deeply about Tyr's claim about her father being the strongest holy knight, Theo connects the dots to a certain noble family called Luminen, the House. Luminen is an aristocratic family that has produced knights with high-purity holy power for generations. Tyr also tells them that she had lived alone with her father in a small, cozy house, debunking everything they thought about her belonging to the Luminen household. She tells them about how her father had suddenly left one day too, making her end up all alone with Kamang in the forest. Taking a closer look at her stone necklace, Theo immediately identifies it as a permanent summon that she subconsciously summoned after awakening her power. She then tells them that now that they can finally pass their mercenary exam, she'll definitely find her father at the Order, even though he won't recognize her. When they ask what she means, she explains that when Kamang used his magic to turn back time, they ended up in a time where her father didn't know her yet, almost like she had been erased from his head. Listening to her story, the men come up with their own theories about what happened. According to them, Tyr had been born into the high and mighty Luminen family as an anomaly with magic power. So to protect her, her father must have escaped with her and lived with her in a stable out in the woods. But then someone must have still intervened and erased Tyr from his mind, causing him to abandon her in the forest. While Theo rages on with his theories on the issue, Basto tells him to slow down as they can't be certain about anything yet. Theo then assures Tyr that although she might be discarded as too young to join a mercenary group, they'd find a way around it and ensure she reunites with her dad. They each thank her for saving their lives, but warn her specifically to keep her abilities hidden, so she doesn't become a target to the bad guys. Terrified, Tyr agrees to what she's told, as she can't afford to jeopardize her sole mission of finding her father. Still, they know how much of an asset her power would be to the group, so they think of ways to sign her up as a member while concealing her identity and powers. Tyr then comes up with an interesting idea where she'd claim to be an old man who transformed into a 4-year-old. That way, she'd be able to remain the figurehead boss of the mercenary group, so she can be secretly capable. A few days later, the group decides to head to the Order to actualize their plan. When they arrive at the Order to register their mercenary guild, they tender the monster stones they acquired, and the knights attending wonder how they were able to gather that much. Aside from Basto, who looks fairly strong, the rest of the group seem like washed-up filler characters. When they try to interrogate them, to their surprise, they are answered by Tyr, who sternly introduces herself as a great archmage and necromancer, asking them not to disrespect her. While the knights wonder what business a child has in a place like that, Tyr summons one of her skeleton soldiers and flexes it on them to prove her claim. Shocked, they ask her to state her name, but Basto cuts in, calling them insolent for daring to ask his lord's name. Tyr then orders Basto to stand down. They had taken their time to rehearse the kind of act they would play to make Tyr live up to the Necromancer King title beforehand. As rehearsed, Tyr intimidates the knights further with her skeleton while telling them that they cannot handle her true name. She tells them her alias is Necromancer King and that they should address her as that. Meanwhile, Theo secretly makes fun of the way she mispronounces certain words the whole time. Turns out the intimidation works, as the knights take down their names and begin the official registration immediately. They are then led to a waiting room to await the official document. In the waiting room, Nordics, who is only hired to fill in the minimum requirement number, asks them to let him stick around with them, at least until he's able to repay Tyr for saving him, and they agree. He asks if Tyr has thought of a name for the group, but Tyr, who was really occupied with planning how to act appropriately, didn't think of it. She suggests a childish name, but it only makes Theo make fun of her loudly. When a knight returns to attend to them, he reveals that their mercenary number has been revealed, but tells Tyr he would like to ask her some further questions. Recalling the strict instructions she had received from the rest about not revealing her identity earlier, Tyr simply intimidates the knight with one of her skeleton soldiers again until he agrees to stop asking. Before the knight leaves, he reveals that they've received strict orders from above that they should not give an identification number to Basto. When they asked why, he revealed that Basto had been reported by Carl to have committed illegal acts within the mercenary group. According to Carl, Basto had extorted large amounts of money and goods from the guild and run away with it. Turns out Carl was the one responsible for committing all these atrocities he accused Basto of doing. He had then terminated his identification number without any verification process, so he would not be able to prove his innocence. Hearing this, Basto goes into a rage because not only did Carl rob him of a chance to protect his family, but he also labeled him as a criminal when he hadn't committed any offense. Smart as he is, Theo figures out that Carl must have tried to bribe someone to establish those kinds of orders. He then decides to interrogate the knight about it. Hearing the word bribery, Tyr recalls what she was taught about bribery from her previous timeline, so she's able to understand the implications of what Carl is doing to oppress Basto. The knight then explains that he understands Basto's predicament, but sadly even he cannot do anything about it, as the person Carl bribed is a high-ranking commander who is newly appointed. Realizing that there's nothing he can do, Basto begins to lose himself in his thoughts. He had signed up for the mercenary life because he believed it was the only way he could avenge his family. He instructs Theo to escort Tyr away while he finds a way to settle things, only to get interrupted by the biggest shock of his life. Tyr asks the knight for the amount Carl offered, She then tells him she'll be willing to compete with the amount of money he offered. With that, she opens her backpack and tenders an insurmountable amount of precious jewels. She then tells him she's willing to offer even more, and unlike the usual kind of bribe, which is usually offered in apple boxes, she announces that she'll be giving it openly in luxury bags, taking the whole room by surprise. 1 hour later, a new identification number is issued to Basto. Now that they're official, they're required to register the name of their group. To everyone's surprise, Tyr registers their mercenary group as Agavert, which turns out way better than they expected. Later, when they ask her how she came up with the name, she reveals that she had seen the word Travaga written boldly on a signpost during their wait, so she decided to arrange the letters backwards. While they leave, Basto thanks Tyr genuinely, promising to help her find her father no matter what. She then orders that they eat something delicious when they get back to their inn. After that moment, rumors began to spread about the mysterious mercenary group. It then doesn't take long for the news to get to Tessitan Veronio, the leader of the Trevaga mercenary group. In the outskirts of the city at the Trevaga mercenary group, some of Tessitan's subjects spread the news about the interesting Agavert mercenary group. While some of the members discuss if the new mercenary group is worth their interest, Alaric, a superior member, shares what he knows about the group. According to the facts he has gathered, one of the members of the group is a mage, which is already rare enough on its own. To become a mage, one must have been born with magical powers as an innate talent, and even with that, it takes a heckload of training to get to that realm. He explains further that not only is this mysterious individual a mage, but the attribute he's rumored to control is necromancy, an attribute they've only heard of in legends. Intrigued, Tessitan asks if the information is verified, and Alaric confirms it as he had gotten it from a trusted source. Livia, one of the members of the group, remarks that all the previous mages in the entire continent had been snatched up by the top-ranking mercenary group, so having a new one suddenly emerge as a group leader is something remarkable. Tessitan goes through the names of the group members and is surprised that he has never heard anything about them before, except for Basto, who was pretty well known when he was the vice-captain of the Death Hound. Realizing that the mysterious mage had used Necromancer King as an alias instead of an actual name, coupled with the fact that he claims to have transformed into the form of a 4-year-old, he concludes that the individual is definitely an interesting fellow. He then jokingly tells other mercenary group leaders to start getting nervous so they don't fall behind this Necromancer King in rank. This pisses off the Reaper leader, whose party ranked second, and he yells at Tessitan for acting cocky because he's the first. To him, he believes it won't be long before that position gets snatched up. In reality, he knows that ever since Tessitan founded Trevaga and appeared, he hadn't dropped from the first place in the mercenary group rankings, not even once. But that doesn't change Reaper's beliefs. After hearing Reaper lash out at him, Tessitan makes fun of him by asking if he thinks he'll take his position if he slips up. And this pisses Reaper because not in the slightest is Tessitan bothered, and he scolds Reaper by telling him that going to the gym isn't enough to make him the first because he'll also have to use his head. Tessitan gets up along with his party, and as they are about to leave, he advises Reaper not to be so annoying, or else he won't leave a single magic stone for Reaper to attack from that moment. Infuriated, Reaper calls him an insufferable dude. Outside the first gate in, Tyre bathes in sunlight and stuffs her mouth with some cookies the old crone baked. Vale is glad she's happy, and he refers to her as Necromancer King, but she feels embarrassed when he calls her that, so she tells him to call her Tyr if it's just them. The young man barely holds himself back from bursting out laughing. Then he asks her if she likes the name so much and pokes her cheek while at it. She thinks about it for a bit and notes that the strongest characters have nicknames. After all, the popular Puppetmon dolls too have aliases. She then talks gibberish, which Vale doesn't understand, and she asks him if he's dumb, but then Basto and Nordic show up with their group's cloak, which has her cute rabbit doll design. Her eyes glimmer at it, and the grown men do not have any problem with it except Vale, who calls it a pink bug, shattering Tyr's heart. Basto then reminds him of their circumstances and why Tyr, their leader's identity, mustn't be exposed, which means that once she makes a decision, it cannot be ignored. Vale knows that's the case, but cannot stand the image which looks so girly, and he calls it a moldy bug. Nordics then recollects how he and Tyr worked really hard to draw it, and it was difficult for her to pick among the Puppetmon. Now Vale brings out ink and says he's going to erase it, and Tyr, who sees him, leaps at him and bites his arm, clinging to him like a piranha. He yells at her for getting drool on his arm and compares her to a dog, but she refuses. Still, he tells her he'll do what he has to do. And as he prepares to pour the ink on the image, Tyr cries out to him to stop, and to their surprise, the ink pours away. Vale then looks at his hand and sees blood dripping from it and sees a talking dragon, asking if the reason he was summoned was because of Vale's tantrum. Kamang licks itself after biting Vale's finger, shocking everyone, including Tyr. Vale then asks Tyr if he summoned her beast to attack him, but she denies that being the case. Basto then throws Vale a napkin and tells him not to interrogate Tyr any further, and just like he must have heard from Nordics about Tyr not awakening her power for long, so controlling it would be difficult. Vale tries his best to keep his cool as he swipes the blood of his finger, and he states that the act is against a member. Basto then corrects him by warning Vale not to act brashly because he'll lose. Vale stares at the dragon, who simply smirks at him, and this pisses him off, so he cracks his knuckles and prepares to fight. Quickly, Tyr grabs her dragon, saying she can't forgive him, and runs upstairs to scold him. On getting there, she stares menacingly at Kamang and asks him why he hurt Vale, but Kamang simply lies down, and it surprises Tyr, who tries to scold him some more by asking him who told him to do so. But then, he tells her it's his choice, and she realizes his free will and how he can choose to answer. She then tries to warn him not to hurt people, but then he reminds her that she first bit Vale. Shocked, Tyr tries to defend herself, but then Kamang praises her for doing well, because he didn't know she could go so far alone without him. He then calls himself pathetic for hibernating so long just to turn back time a bit. She readily defends him by reminding him he said touching dimensions is hard, but Kamang corrects her by saying he used a lot of power because he's weak. He then advises Tyr to continue doing what she was doing, and it's better to hide her identity with her Necromancer King title, and he too, as her permanent summon. She wonders if he too has a reason to hide his identity, and then agrees not to tell anyone that he's a legendary puppet monster. Just then, he tells her his name, Lucario. Kamang transforms into a boy, and having known that it's thanks to him, she'll get to see her dad again. Tyr thanks Lucario and hugs him. She then cleans her snotty nose and informs him that they are entering the Order the very next day and will find her dad and definitely repay Lucario for this kindness. She tells him whenever he's tired he should rest in her bag, and to keep his identity it's better to continue calling him Kamang. Without giving him a chance to argue, she finalizes her decision before dragging him along with her. Once their hands touch, Lucario confirms that it was her power that awakened him on that fateful night. She heads downstairs happily and tells the others that Kamang will apologize. But they look at her like she has lost it. Then she realizes that he has turned back into the pendant. Vale lets it slide, saying it's cool before his finger gets bitten off, and this makes her happy, so she hugs him. But then he thinks of her as a weirdo. The next day, Basto informs her that as they are about to head out, from that moment she'll be the Necromancer King again, and she agrees with them. Later that day, they departed the inn and left for the Order, and when they passed through the Order gate, Tyr had expected to see big buildings like Jongno-gu, but she realized the place was much bigger than she thought, and instead, she encountered scenery she had only seen on TV. As they walk through the desert, Vale asks Basto why they will need to go to the Populosa weapon district to fix his warhammer, because they can't go back and rent a carriage, but Basto says they have to save money until they reach the center of the Order. Vale then remembers how they emptied every penny they had because of the bribe to let Basto in. Nordics, on the other hand, speaks of how desolate the desert is, despite it being many years since the land was attacked by monsters. As he walks ahead, Vale finds it weird that Nordics has more stamina than him. He glances at Tyr and finds it funny that she, who was energetic earlier when they were passing through the busy streets, had already fallen asleep, but then Basto says it's easier for them to move while she's asleep, and then he urges them to start moving. During that period, Tyr, who quickly fell asleep, dreamed of the old days when she and her dad were together. Back then, he explained that it was an accident that brought them to Jongno-gu. He explained that he didn't know what happened and how they got there, but if they kept on searching, they should find a way for them to return. Then she encouraged him, and he agreed, reassuring her that they would find a way to return home together. Tyr had learned firsthand how hard it was for her dad to keep smiling even after falling into an unfamiliar world, which must have been scary and sad. She was sure that if she hadn't come across Basto by chance, she would still be wandering the forest alone, and it was thanks to her dad telling her about this world every day that although the place feels unfamiliar, she could feel reassured thanks to his stories. She has thought about how hard it must have been to suddenly be transported to Jongno-gu, but she tells him to wait a little longer because she will give him all the jewels and definitely protect him this time around. 2 days later, they arrive at Pearlport City, and Nordics notes that the place hasn't changed at all. Vale, on the other hand, catches his breath and complains about how they had walked for 2 days straight, but Nordics, who claimed he was over 70, feels perfectly fine. The geezer then asks if they want to look around the city, but then Basto suggests they secure a room and get properly settled because it'll take a week to Populosa Weapon District. Nordics then suggests the Red Glove Inn, since it's the only place that accepts credit, and for that reason it was always crowded with mercenaries, so it's perfect for investigating information about Tyr's parents while they are there. On getting to the inn, Nordics says he'll check to see if there are available rooms, so he tells them to wait outside. Once he goes in, Vale asks if Tyr is still asleep, and Basto says it's only natural, given that they walked rough roads all day the previous day. Then, they had gone through a lot of effort in pulling her out when she fell into a sand trap. Also, during the night when they camped, Vale wasn't ready to let other mercenaries passing by see their trump card asleep. Presently, they see that Nordics is taking a while, so they enter the inn just to have a seat. There, the innkeeper informs them that they have a guest who'll check out early that day, but until then, there's no room. Curious, Vale asks what they're talking about, and the innkeeper named Rudy fills him in. But just then, Tessatan comes out of his inn, and the entire Agavert party, aside from the sleeping Tyre, is shocked to see him. He grumbles to Rudy, and as he walks down the stairs, Vale has his eyes glued to him, while noting that just standing before Tessiton alone is far overwhelming. Tessiton then looks at Tyr, who is covered in clothes, and she piques his interest, so he asks who she is, but suddenly, his teammate calls out to him and urges him to be ready because the boat is already about to depart. Left with no choice, Tessiton leaves, and as soon as he is out of the inn, Agavert's party members talk about his impressive presence and the rumors of his strange swordsmanship. Vale speaks about how he once heard about Tessiton's sword style being noble and vulgar at the same time, and he finds it unbelievable because it sounds like something only someone who lost to Tessiton would make up. After all, they were upset. Rudy, who learns of the rumor, says it makes sense and they aren't entirely wrong. Basto then asks for more details, but it isn't professional for Rudy to snitch on his customer, so he waves them off and offers them the free room. Tyr, on the other hand, dreams where she hears her dad's voice, and she imagines her dad as the customer while she's the innkeeper. When she opens her eyes, she sees an unfamiliar ceiling and freaks out, so Basto acts kindly towards her, unlike Vale, who is strict with her like a mother, and says it was high time she woke up either way, else she wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Nordics then tells her that they've arrived at Pearl City and are in an inn. She glances outside the window, observing the city while the others head downstairs to attend to some business. As soon as they leave the room, they make up their mind to learn more about the Luminen family and also the whereabouts of Kim Young-soo, so they go straight to the inn's basement dining hall to investigate. Meanwhile, Tyre admits that Talokium is as beautiful as her dad had once told her, and from what she knows, she calls men ships and women ports. Downstairs, they try asking about who Kim Young-soo is, but the people there haven't heard of such a name before. One angry person then yells at Basto for talking about holy nights after showing his face for the first time in a long while. Vale then joins the conversation by yelling at the man for acting high and mighty. The confused man asks who he is, and Vale reveals he knows Basto very well. Vale then taunts him by offering the man a drink and saying he doesn't know anything about the knights, which is why the man is yelling loudly. The dude immediately gets fired up, so he gulps the beer while yelling at them to sit down because he's about to tell them everything he knows about the Luminen family. Just then, Tyr spots Tessiton and looks at him like he has a familiar face. As Tyr watches the members of the Travaga mercenary group walk through the street, she wonders if the reason she's seeing a handsome man who looks so familiar to her father is that she dreamt about him the previous night. She immediately puts on her hood disguise and dashes through the receptionist area, where Rudy is fast asleep, to meet them. When she reaches the road, she takes a closer look at Tessiton and realizes that he's not a look-alike, but actually her dad himself, causing her to leap forward in excitement. Meanwhile, at the bar, a drunk man explains that the Luminen family is filled with some of the strongest knights in the Empire, and the head of the family, Valentia, has 4 sons, who are all high-ranking holy knights. He reveals that the first son, Edmund, is the tactical advisor of the Knight Order, the second son, Leonardo, is the division commander, the third son is the chief medical officer, but before he can mention the fourth, Vale cuts him off, saying he already knows everything. He then starts yelling at Basto, asking why he feels he doesn't know about the popular Luminen family, but the man tells him to just listen to the end of his explanation. The man then discloses that even though the first 3 sons are very famous, the whereabouts of the family's 4th son are completely unknown. Vale finds this shocking, but he asks the man if it's possible that the 4th son married against their family's wishes and ran away after having a child. However, the man reveals that the youngest in the family just became an adult the previous year, and this confuses them even more because it's almost impossible for the man to have a 4-year-old child at that age. At the same time, Tyr politely tells a bunch of strangers around her to excuse her as she struggles through the crowd, hoping to meet her long-lost dad. But the Travaga squad has already boarded a boat. However, she still runs full steam ahead to meet them, only to get knocked down by a suitcase being carried by a random stranger. At the bar, Vale asks the man if there are other young masters of the house, but the man says it would have been the hottest news in town if something so joyous happened in their family. Vale agrees because he knows the Luminen would throw a big extravagant party, which involves the Emperor and Empress if they have a new birth, and this means there's one remaining possibility. Back on the street, Tyr grabs onto her head, wondering what hit her, but when she remembers the voice of her dad calling out to her, she runs forward to catch the ship. As more of her dad's loving words flood her mind, she crushes ahead passionately with tears in her eyes, calling out to her daddy. When Tessiton hears her voice, he turns back and sees her passionately reaching out to him, with tears standing in her eyes due to the loving flashbacks that invaded her mind at the moment. But since he doesn't know her, he ignores her and moves ahead. As the ship leaves, Tyr cries desperately, eventually falling to her knees as more tears stream from her eyes. Back at the bar, Vale asks if there's a possibility that the head of the Luminen family, Valentia, had a late child with another woman. But the man says it's not possible because Valentia loved his wife Eleonora, the Saint of Richard, with his entire body and soul throughout his life. Basto adds that the love story between Valentia and Eleonora, who wielded the most powerful holy power in history, is very famous, and because of this, he guesses that their marital harmony was also very exquisite. However, Vale says it's ridiculous because no one knows what happens between a married couple and explains that behind the scenes, most seemingly happy noble couples plot to destroy each other. Because of this, he concludes that if the head of the Luminen family did have an illegitimate child, then it would definitely be connected to what happened to Eleonora. Just then, Nordics arrives and informs them that Tyr is missing, causing everyone at the table to lose their cool. Basto and Vale immediately rush out into the streets to look for them, but the merchants they ask don't know anything about where she went. However, Nordics informs them that someone saw a girl walking alone at the dock, and this makes Basto so scared that he regrets telling her to stay alone in her room. Vale tells him to hurry while running towards the dock, and even though he's telling them that everything will be fine since Tyr is a smart girl, he feels terrible for doing something as dumb as leaving a young girl all alone and prays that nothing happens to her. When they arrive at the dock, they see Tyr all crouched up on the ground and rush towards her while desperately calling her name. As she lies on the ground, filled with misery, she remembers Kamang telling her that the version of her father she'd meet in this time period would have no idea who she is, and it's at that moment she finally understands what he means. She initially thought that meeting her dad would allow her to explain everything because all she wanted was for him to be alive, but now she realizes that approaching him when he doesn't know her would only make him find her annoying and abandon her. As her teammates help her back up, she remembers how her dad used to play with her while telling her he loved her more than anyone else in the world, and that he could do anything so long as he had her by his side. It's at that moment she realizes that things will never go back to how they used to be, and this makes her bawl her eyes out once again while her concerned teammates look on. When they return to the inn, Vale complains to the others that Tyr is driving him insane because she'd lost her voice from crying for her daddy, but Basto tells him to lower his voice. Nordics feels pity for her and wonders why she suddenly became like this, but Vale calls her a stupid brat, asking why she's whining about her missing daddy despite claiming to be a powerful necromancer. When Nordics asks if they found any information about the Luminen family, Vale says none of the 4 young masters had any joyous news. Even though the head of the family is the most likely suspect and he's not too old to have an offspring, Basto doubts that it's him because Tyr says she lived together with her dad, and Duke Luminen never missed any official events. In fact, he's currently engaged in the magic stone attacks, and even when sieges are prolonged, he camps for months and goes back and forth to battlefields. Vale also brings up the fact that Tyr said he can't remember her due to the oblivion magic he's under, and this doesn't make sense because no one would dare tamper with the Lord of Luminen's memories. After brainstorming for several more minutes, Nordic says they shouldn't blindly trust the clue that Tyr's dad is the most powerful holy knight and guesses that the name Kim Young-soo is also an alias. He knows that Tyr is smart and wouldn't want to tell any lies, but he admits that they lack clues and tells the others that they should explicitly ask her about her father when she wakes up from her slumber. This leaves Basto speechless as he remembers a heartwarming moment where he hugged Tyr, and Vale then asks the big question, which is what will happen to the Agavert group when she finds her dad. Meanwhile, Tyr is having a dream about the Travaga group facing off against a group of deadly monsters. When Tessidan tells Livia to protect her, Tyr is surprised to hear her dad's voice, but she wonders who Livia is. She also notices that her body isn't moving like she wants it to. While holding on to her, Livia desperately calls out Alaric, who has been injured by a giant monster, and it's at that moment that Tyr opens her eyes and sees that there are monsters and people around. Alaric tells Livia not to come close and instructs her to take baby Tyr and run away. At first, Livia tries to argue with him out of concern for his well-being, but when he asks her if she's willing to let the little girl get hurt, she grabs Tyr tightly and assures her that she'll be fine. However, when she tries to move forward, she suddenly falls to her knees due to the injuries she'd sustained, but she still tries to comfort Tyr, telling her that they need to find a way to escape the crack. Even though Tyr doesn't know who's holding her, she takes comfort in Livia's cold skin as she hugs her and calls out to her dad. As Livia wonders what to do to save Tyr, Tessitan arrives and takes Tyr from her hand before asking her when she was poisoned. This excites her so much that she calls out to her daddy from her mind, even though she can't speak as a baby. As Livia struggles with her damaged body, she apologizes to Tessitan and also to Tyr since she promised to protect her. She then collapses to the ground, causing Tessitan to call her name out of concern and asks him if Alaric is dead. Tessitan is far too concerned for her to even answer her question, but as her body fully succumbs to the poison, she tells him it's fine to leave them behind and escape. She claims that making it this far was amazing and brings up how they all went from being ordinary people who were slashing pig throats in the alley to becoming warriors on the battlefield with him. As she stretches her hand towards little Tyr, she expresses regret over the fact that she wouldn't get to see her walk like she wanted and tells her to be healthy and always be cheerful with everyone, especially Tessitan. Her hand then falls to the ground and her teary eyes go blank, showing that she's finally given up the ghost. So Tessitan starts walking away with Tyr while assuring her that everything will be okay. He promises her that they'll get out of there, and once they do, everything will be fine again, but standing in front of him is a large group of terrifying monsters. Seeing this, Tyr immediately starts panicking as she realizes that her dad is in danger, and in the real world, she wakes up from this nightmare screaming. She's surprised that she had such an unusual dream, but she realizes that it's the first time she's had a dream that's so vivid, making her wonder if it was actually a dream in the first place or something that actually happened in the past. She remembers how Livia called Basto's name during her final words and recalls that her dad once mentioned Basto as one of his comrades. Since she was a very young baby in the dream, she wonders if those events actually happened when she was still a baby. During one of her cozy moments with her dad, he says coming to that place was an accident, and this makes her wonder if the accident he's actually talking about is the dream she just had. However, she's also confused about the fact that Livia called him a leader in the dream, even though he claimed he was a holy knight, and she gets teary-eyed while admitting that she doesn't actually know anything. She feels sad because she thought everything would be fine once she reunited with her father. But suddenly, Kamang appears and asks her what she wants to do next, before asking her if she found Tessatan. At that moment, Tyr stares deeply into his eyes while struggling with her tears and admits that he was right. She remembers the previous conversation she had with him in his dragon form, where he told her that her dad would completely forget about her when they met, and she no longer has the confidence to tell him that she's actually his daughter. As Kamang holds onto her face, she spills even more tears while asking him what she should do next. She then hugs him tightly while admitting that she misses her dad more than anything because she really loves him. While hugging her, Kamang remembers that he could faintly hear Tyr and Tessatan's voices while he was asleep in the other world. When he heard her laughing, he felt good. But on the days when she cried, his heart felt uncomfortable, like the whole world was shattering inside him. While holding her tightly, he remembers the first time they met when Tyr was crying seriously after losing her father, and he realizes that the entire reason he came to their world in the first place was to find a way to stop her tears. He then informs her that in the world, there's something called destiny recurrence. This confuses her, so he explains that no matter what kind of life a person relives, most humans will meet the same fate. Before he can finish his explanation, she asks if he means that her dad will fall into Jongno-gu again, and in her mind, she's terrified by the idea that this version of her dad, Tessatan, will fall victim to the very monster incident that destroyed him in her original timeline. However, she decides that she'll stop it since her dad isn't doomed yet, but she's worried that he'll fall into Korea again. She then remembers a day in the past when Granny was walking in the street with her, and two old-timers were talking about them. One of them said Tessatan wouldn't have to suffer as much if he stayed alone, and the other agreed, saying she's surprised by how diligent he is because it wouldn't be strange if he sent her away. However, her granny tells the ladies to shut their traps since it's none of their business. Because of this flashback, she decides that she'll do her best to make sure her dad doesn't suffer because of her and disappear forever. With all the boldness in the world, she declares that while she's in his homeland, she'll make sure that her dad, Tessatan, lives until he's a 100-year-old grandpa. Hearing this, Kamang smiles and tells her that she's the only one who can pull it off. Just then, she hears a voice coming from her door, asking her if she's done crying, and she immediately recognizes the voice as that of Vale. When the door opens, she sees all three of her companions, with Vale asking her if she can eat, while the other two show similar levels of concern for her. Nordics then tells her there's an important question she needs to ask, and this stuns her. During breakfast, they ask her for a detailed description of her dad's appearance, as well as the place where they live together. And when she asks why they're asking for those things in particular, Basto says they intend to help her find her dad but lack the necessary information to do so. At first, she's surprised, but then she remembers that she only told them her dad's name, so she boldly reveals that she and her dad lived in Jongno-gu. This confuses everyone, so she tells them about all the different things in the town she stayed in before revealing that her dad suddenly moved to Korea with her. She then points to her bag while telling them that it's a handbag from Jongno-gu. And it's at that moment that Basto realizes that the logo on the bag isn't a crest, but actually writing. Hearing this, Vale admits that Old Man Nordics was right since she didn't seem to be telling any lies, but he still finds her story very confusing. Tyr claims that she isn't lying, so Vale agrees with her before advising the group to return to their original mission, which is heading to the Order and visiting the Holy Knights. When he asks to confirm if Tyr's dad is in Jongno-gu, she nods while assuring him that he's there since she saw him earlier. Vale then asks if she'll leave Agavert when she finds her father, and this question leaves her speechless. During an earlier conversation between her three teammates, Vale asks the others if she'll dissolve Agavert after finding her dad, and Basto claims it's highly likely. He claims he'll go back to being a wandering mercenary if it happens, and when he asks Nordics for his plans, the old mage says he'll go back to the gate area since he never intended to become a mercenary. However, Vale refuses to accept this because in his mind, finding her dad and Tyr being the leader of the group are two separate things. He asks the others if they could have her dad join Agavert too, if she absolutely can't stand being apart from him because he doesn't want to miss out on a golden opportunity. He explains that he's not asking Tyr to work because dark attribute mages are so rare that just existing makes them legends, but if she continues to be the group's head, they can grow their mercenary group and aim for the first rank, thereby making it easier to protect Tyr and her dad. Hearing this, Basto admits that it makes sense, but claims it wouldn't be easy because mercenary work is so dangerous that he'd oppose it if he were her father. Vale knows that he's right, but he needs Agavert with the Necromancer King as the leader because he doesn't want to go back to suffering and poverty. However, in the present, Tyr assures them that she won't leave the mercenary group and puts her cup down while boldly declaring that she'll become independent of her dad from now on. Hearing this, Basto and Nordics are so stunned that their jaws drop to the floor, but Vale is fascinated with her sudden resolve. Basto asks her how she arrived at that conclusion, but then rephrases his question to ask if she means that she'll stop looking for her dad. Tyr says that's not what she means, because she still has to find him. But when she thinks about the next step in her master plan, she suddenly goes somber and tells them that she won't cling to him to care for her like before. Basto is shocked to hear this, but even more stunned by Granny, who then watches her tell the others that she and her dad will live their own lives moving forward because she can't stay wrapped up in his coattails forever. Before Basto can express his concerns with her new plan, Vale rushes over to her and cheerfully supports her idea, claiming that 4 years old is more than enough for her to become independent. He reveals that he also grew up without parents from when he was merely 2 years old, and as everyone grows more curious about his backstory, he says they don't need to know that. He then tells Tyr that they need to start earning money properly as mercenaries, since she's now decided to become independent, and assures her that her loyal teammates at Agavert are always available to help her when she's in trouble. This makes her remember that she's now the Necromancer King, and she decides to work hard from that day on. Hearing this, Vale tells her to write a pledge on a piece of paper, swearing to never leave Agavert until she dies. But Tyr is stunned because she's never been asked to do something like that. He also informs her that she can only withdraw from this agreement if she has permission from all 3 members and asks her to sign, as the others wonder how he put everything together so fast. Basto knows that the document won't have any legal binding, but he still decides to write a pledge as well, and Nordics agrees to join in because it seems fun. Later that night, as Nordics tucks Tyr in, she asks Basto if he really hates Holy Knights, and he confirms that he doesn't like them. When Vale mentions that all mercenaries hate them, Tyr asks if the reason for this beef is that the Holy Knights all took bribes, but he teases her by playfully suggesting that her dad was one of the Holy Knights who took bribes. Tyr argues that her dad is nice, but in her mind, she wonders why Basto claims to hate Holy Knights, even though he was working with her dad before the accident in her dream. As she remembers the passing words of Livia, she wonders if her dad was actually doing an undercover stakeout like the cops on TV, since she clearly heard him say he's a Holy Knight. She tells Basto that she's curious as to why he hates Holy Knights, and Basto replies that it's because the Imperial family abandoned the mercenaries first. To make things clearer, he specified that they abandoned everyone other than nobles. Back then, magic stones suddenly erupted in the continent, causing monsters to pour out of the cracks. Since the Empire was on the brink of ruin, they abandoned most of the land except for the Order and tried to guard only a small portion of the territory with the knights they had. In these abandoned lands, people rose and called themselves mercenaries as they attacked magic stones to build up power and reclaimed their land from the monsters. While local lords and mercenaries fought hard to reclaim their territory, the Imperial family pretended not to know about anything and offered no support. Basto then claims that the mercenaries don't actually hate the Holy Knights, but rather they despise the Imperial family's choice. After the mercenaries reclaimed the territory, the conflict between the Order and non-Order regions worsened, so to win back the public support, the Imperial family expanded the Order's borders, but only to regions that they found useful, and one of those is Pearl City, where the Agavert squad is currently staying. While lying on his bed, Nordics explains that there were many mercenaries in Pearl City because the place always had a large floating population. So until the Imperial family and the Church placed a concentration there, the whole region had deep hatred for the Imperial family. When Tyr asks what a consecration is, Nordics says that it means offered to God to make it holy, and it's used to ask for divine protection. Pearl City, being a holy ground of God, came under the protection of a being called Saradin through a sacred ritual, thereby ensuring that the city would be protected from magic stones and monsters. Hearing this, Tyr asks if things really got better with no magic stones appearing, and he tells her that it's how things have been since the consecration before telling her to go to bed. However, Tyr angrily grabs her pillow, ranting about how greedy the Imperial army is, and she claims that even if her dad is a Holy Knight, he'd probably hate the Imperial family as well. Basto is shocked to hear this, but Vale praises her for speaking facts. Tyr further states that if the Imperial family has something that is effective, they should consecrate it everywhere, because failure to do so in other cities will leave them in a state where they constantly have to fight. Nordic says she's right, but Tyr suddenly gets somber again as she begs Basto not to hate her dad when they finally find him. This makes Basto smile, and he tells her to sleep so that they can do their Necromancer King speech training the next day, and she agrees. The next morning, some men are troubled because the waves are high even though the weather is clear, and one of them, named Raul, asks his partner what they should do since other ships are leaving. His partner Enzo says they'll catch big fish easily if they go where the other captains mentioned, and claims that ever since he quit being a holy knight, his body aches when he doesn't move. They both decide to catch a big fish and tell their mother they're doing okay so she can rest easy. Some years ago, during a family camping trip, their dad asked them what a knight's duty on the battlefield is, and they both agreed that it's to wipe out the enemy. This makes their dad smile, but he tells them that his job is a little different because his duty is to protect both of them, just as he promised their mother. He then pats them on the head, causing them to laugh cheerfully with him. Soon after, they were attacked by a deadly monster, and their dad faced off against it to protect them, but died in the process. When they returned home and broke this news to their family, their mother cried while clutching her dead husband's sword, and that was when they decided to protect their mother at all costs. Back in the present, Enzo notices that something has been caught under their boat, which is weird because there aren't any reefs, but little do they know that there's an entire building directly under their boat. At their home, their grandmother is yelling at their mom, Marianne, asking if she's lost her mind for refusing to take the position of the governor of Pearl City, but Marianne says she can't be a governor since the only experience she has is handling paperwork for a small family. This makes her mom even more concerned as she asks if she plans to stay shut in her room forever, and she reminds her that it's because she's acting like this that Raul and Enzo are changing more and more. She brings up how Raul started hanging out with bad friends and how Enzo has refused to eat anything for 3 days, and while Marianne cries her eyes out, she reminds her that the boys lost their father at such a young age, before motivating her to pull herself back together since she's their only parent. Sometime later, at the Pearl City Administration Building, Marianne stares at the city through her window, now looking more elegant and composed as she's the new governor of Pearl City. During a meeting, one of her officials tells her that there's nothing more to fix in Pearl City because, thanks to the consecration, the public sentiment is secure and all she needs to do as Viscountess is to maintain close contact with the imperial court. However, this doesn't sit right with Marianne because it's basically just telling her to be a puppet sitting in a chair, but she decides to play along with it because she'd already made up her mind to take the role for the sake of her twins. She noticed that after coming to Pearl City, the twins started talking more and went to take a look around the city center. They also resumed their sword training, and sometimes came back happily, talking about the fun things they did at sea after hitching a ride on a boat, and Marianne wished for things to stay that way. Suddenly, she notices a commotion going on outside, and the people on the streets scream in shock as a magic stone appears from the sea. As everyone tries to evacuate the city, the Agavert squad observes this shocking turn of events through their window, and Tyr asks Nordics if the consecration has been turned off. Elsewhere, a man appeals to the mercenaries to step up and solve the issue, reminding them that monsters will start pouring out of the magic stone when the sun sets. As Marianne desperately rushes through the streets, one of her officials reminds her that it's raining heavily, but she charges in anyway because she's worried about her twins, who are yet to return from their sea trip. She then spots a mercenary leader ranting about how they've never seen a magic stone rising from the sea, accusing the desperate civilians of sending them to their deaths since they have no idea what could come out of the magic stone. One of the mercenaries on his team agrees that the leader is right and claims that they can't drop everything to help out either. As Rudy rattles his brain trying to think of a way out of this situation, one of the civilians brings up the fact that Travaga members were staying at the inn. Hearing this, Marianne is stunned because she knows the first-ranked mercenary group will be able to deal with the magic stone, but Rudy says they left the place in the morning, and even if they send a message, it'll take a full day for them to arrive. This makes the people worry even more as they aren't prepared to leave their homes and boats again. The old man then concludes that they're definitely going to die since none of the fighters are stepping up to face the magic stone, and then he starts yelling at the mercenaries, claiming that they're no different from the holy knights that abandoned them all those years ago. This gets the mercenary leader angry to the point where he kicks him to the ground and calls him useless for always needing their help. While grabbing his shirt, Carl threatens to make him pay for comparing them to holy knights, but Marianne intervenes and tells him to stop. Everyone around is surprised that the governor is in their presence, except for Carl, who nonchalantly asks her who she is. She boldly tells him to show her proper respect since he's speaking to the governor of Pearl City. But Carl laughs in disbelief and claims that she looks more like a governor's mistress than the governor himself. Just then, Basto makes a dramatic entrance by delivering a brutal punch which sends Carl to the ground and telling him with a fiery look in his eyes that he'd long anticipated meeting him again. Carl is shocked as he wonders how he got there, but Vale shuts him up by pointing a dagger at his throat while telling him that they went through so much hell because of him. He then angrily tells him that their leader had to empty all their money while cleaning up the mess that he made, and Tyr, who stands behind him, notices that Carl looks like a really mean person. Nordics arrives and greets Marianne, calling her Viscountess Wavril, and this shocks everyone around because they know Wavril is one of the Empire's most wealthy families. As her official covers her up, one of the mercenaries asks why someone so important is standing in the rain, and she tells them it's because she's worried about her twins, Raul and Enzo. Rudy then invites her inside the building, and as she walks in, Tyr tells Basto to join them, so he threatens Carl, telling him to wait outside as their leader will make him pay for everything he did. After they enter the building and shut the door, Carl starts shivering from fear. As one of the mercenaries helps Carl up, another mercenary asks his colleague about Tyr, who Vale referred to as the leader. The other guy confirms that she is indeed the Necromancer King, and brings up rumors about how she's wearing a disguise to hide her overwhelming powers, which she used to attack both small and medium magic stones in the cave alone. Hearing this, the man is stunned as he wonders what kind of monster she is, since even a powerhouse like Basto is believed to be scared of her. However, someone brings up the fact that she was seen running through the streets crying the previous day, and this makes them conclude that the Necromancer King is a weirdo who pretends to be a troubled girl, but when someone comes to help, she uses an illusion spell on them while torturing them. One of them smacks the other in the head for making up silly fantasies, but the third mercenary asks why the strong ones are also weird in some way, just like Tessiton, who has enough power to destroy the magic stone that's currently terrorizing them. Given everything they've learned, they presume that Egevert is a top 10 mercenary group in the kingdom, but Carl angrily tells them to shut up while his partner holds him back. He's enraged by the fact that the Holy Knights weren't able to fulfill their end of the bargain despite the hefty sum he gave them, and he wonders how Basto came there. But most of all, he's triggered by the fact that the Necromancer King's group, Agavert, might steal the spot of his Deathhound group, so he decides to attack the magic stone himself while others stare in shock. Inside the building, Governor Marianne grabs onto her handkerchief tightly as she worries for her sons, and this makes Nordics worry for her. When she asks where she stopped, he reminds her that she previously asked if there was any word from the Imperial Court. She informs them that her aide has reached out to them, but it'll take time for them to respond. Tyr points out that Marianne has a worried look on her face and asks her if the reason she's constantly staring at the sea is that she has someone lost out there, but Marianne is so shaken up that she struggles to muster up the words to reply to her. The feelings she'd been desperately trying to hide, just like when her husband returned without a piece on his body, suddenly overwhelmed her. All this time she'd been convincing herself that her twins would be okay and she didn't need to worry about them. But in reality, she's terrified that Enzo and Raoul will return as corpses, just like her husband. She grabs her head, screaming in anguish, but Tyr swoops in like an angel and tells everyone that they have to save her family. Vale is confused because their original plan is to get out of town, as all their bags have already been packed. He reminds her that the only reason they delayed their plan is that Carl showed up, and asks if she really wants them to get on a boat and head to the middle of the sea in that weather. Basto says that he's doubtful about attacking the magic stone as well, and Vale claims that it would be a miracle for them to even come back alive from the storm. Nordics says it's even riskier to send the nearby mercenaries out to battle because they don't know the danger that the magic stone holds, and he claims that the best course of action is to evacuate the villagers before the crack activates at night. Tyr then suggests that they shouldn't attack the cloud magic stone, and this shocks everyone, so Vale reminds her that she just said they should go save them. To make things clear, she explains that they don't have to fight the magic stone, but rather zoom in as fast as they can to rescue the governor's sons before returning to convince everyone in town to evacuate. Basto says it's possible for them to achieve this, but Vale argues that they don't have to try it just because it's possible and tells him to think things through. However, Tyr tells him to listen to her and brings up the fact that they're a rookie mercenary group with no fame or money. When Vale asks why she's suddenly pointing these out, she whispers that the governor is rich, reminding them that everything she's wearing is gold and she has no wrinkles on her face. Apparently, she heard during a conversation between Granny and her friend in Jongno-gu that money can be used like an iron to smooth all the wrinkles on the face of women, and she tells her crew that the governor will be so grateful after they save her sons that she'll definitely repay the favor. Elsewhere, Marianne gets out of bed, and she's shocked when her aide tells her that Agavert is going out to look for her sons. After putting on her raincoat, she heads out to the shore with 2 officials and sees Tyr and her squad preparing to head into the sea. When she asks why they decided to do this, Vale and Basto express how surprised they are about how seriously Tyr is taking the mercenary group. With a smile on her face, Tyr tells the governor that they'll be able to find her sons since Basto is an expert at steering boats, and Vale has sharp eyes that can see things far away, and Marianne immediately starts crying. During their meeting earlier on, Nordics was the first to agree with Tyr's idea, and he explained to the others that Marianne will inherit a fortune when the current marquis passes because the Warville family is one of the wealthiest in the order. He also informed them that her husband was a high-ranking knight commander, which means that forming a connection with Marianne will be very advantageous for them. Back in the present, as the Agavert ship sails on, the people on the shore wish them good luck, but suddenly, a Carl arrives in a larger boat and asks them where they're rushing to. After using a pair of binoculars to scope the boat, Rudy notices that the Deathhounds are aboard it, but the surrounding mercenaries aren't shocked since they heard him declare he'd fight the magic stone earlier. As their boat draws closer to the Death Hound's boat, everyone starts panicking that it could cause a disastrous collision, but Tyre is ticked off because Carl is trying to sabotage her team once again. Vale sees Carl yelling at them from his ship and wonders what he's saying, but Basto tells him to ignore Carl. He then asks if he can see the twins, but it turns out that Carl's ship is blocking the view. The scumbag smiles, noting that there's no Necromancer King to get in his way. He looks over to Basto and wonders why Basto keeps showing up and getting on his nerves. He plans that if Basto, the frontline fighter, dies at sea, then a rookie group mercenary like Agavert is finished. With that, he orders his men to stick to the plan. Vale eventually sees the twins' boat and realizes that it's anchored to the magic stone side. Tyr, who stays at the port, worries and wonders what she should do, because if she calls her skeletons to help, they'll just sink since they can't swim, and it'll be pointless. She frets about the matter that she can't help her friends, and she can see Carl trying to bully Basto again. Marianne, on the other hand, is concerned about her children, and she worries after seeing the crack on top of the magic stone getting bigger. While Nordic sees it and believes that monsters might come out soon, Tyr paces about, wanting to help, but doesn't know how. Suddenly, she hears a voice call out to her, and she sees a skull figure in the clouds speak about waiting for her. Meanwhile, Basto, who learns that the twins' boat is anchored to the magic stone where the current is hitting the hardest, also gets struck by the current. Vale notes how their situation is disadvantageous, especially with the sun going down and Carl chasing after them, so he suggests they leave, but Basto locks in and asks about Vale's past. He goes on, but Vale, who knows what he's after, tells him to cut to the chase and get them as close to the twins' boat as possible before anyone dies. On the boat close to the magic stone, one of the twins loses hope and accepts his predicament, but to his surprise, Vale slaps some sense into him, and before they can introduce themselves, he tells the twin to get up and hurry. Just then, an arrow flies in their direction and strikes the ship. Then Carl yells at his men who shot the arrow to aim away from them. Raoul wonders what's going on for the mercenaries to fight each other under such dire conditions, but Vale explains that he and Basto are the good guys who came to save them, unlike the Deathhound group. Raoul is shocked and mistakes Vale for a lady. Still, Vale, clinging to the magic stone, yells at Raoul to get on the big ship after all, his twin is already there. Unfortunately for him, the ship rocks violently, preventing him from keeping his balance. That's when he sees monsters from under the sea, and in that moment, a hurricane hits the boat and he's immediately thrown off by the creatures. Raoul comes crashing down into the sea and he concludes it's over as parents flash across his mind. Suddenly, a huge ship flies upward and Raoul falls into it. He then stares at the mastermind, a little girl not more than 4 years of age, wielding dark spirits and announcing that she has come to save him. The spirits surround her and echo in unison, asking her for her orders, so Tyr orders them to punish Basto's enemy, Carl. Shocked to see such a huge ship spawn out of nowhere, Carl asks his crew members what on earth that ship is, and they tell him it belongs to the Necromancer King. He finds it unbelievable for Tyr to get to them because, in preparation to go after the twins, the Deathhound had wrecked all the ships, leaving only the boat on which Basto is riding, and it's for them to wreck him to his death. He gets pissed and growls at Agavert, but to his surprise, his men fall on the ground and start trembling. Vale then spots Tyr on a big ship and informs Basto and Enzo. A few minutes ago at the port, the men talk about how Tyr started stomping her feet and mumbling to herself. Then all of a sudden, a wrecked ship rose from the sea, and right after that, the gangplank lowered itself for Tyr to come aboard, and when she whispered for people to come aboard, Marianne followed without a moment's hesitation, and in that instant, they disappeared towards the magic stone. Presently, Marianne hugs Raoul, and as he wonders how she is on the ship, she cries and tells him that the Necromancy King's group helped them. Shocked, he stares at Tyr and wonders if she truly is the King of Wraiths. While at it, Tyr receives advice from Grimnir, and she yells at the Deathhounds, informing them that if they touch the current of the dead flowing around her shop, the cold chill of the deep sea will plant terror in their souls. The men who are tormented by the Wraith grovel their heads in horror while screaming they'll die. Carl, however, sees it as a bluff and doesn't believe. Suddenly, he notices that all his members have disappeared. That's when a Wraith calls for him and binds him with her ghostly powers, before asking him if he enjoyed driving her husband to the brink of death nonstop, and also turning her and the villagers into monster fodder. From her voice and statement, he realizes it's Eve he's speaking to, so he begs her, saying he was wrong. Basto hears him call out Eve's name and wonders what's going on, but then Vale returns to the ghostly ship alongside Enzo. Scared by her ability, Vale praises her, and even Basto, who gets on board last, confirms from her that he's seeing the souls of the dead. She then acts as a medium for Grimnir, the ship's captain, relaying his message and spooking the humans on the ship. She explains the rules, and they watch as Carl struggles with Eve, begging for his life. Tyre reveals to Basto how Eve can't go to heaven, and when Eve sees him, she leaves Carl and goes to meet him before opening up that she's trapped in hell just like him. But there is that of resentment, unlike Livia, their daughter. Tyr then speaks up, informing Basto that Eve says he shouldn't worry because Livia has gone to a good place. Basto sobs after hearing this, and Eve comforts him. She then tells him that she doesn't want to put any more burden on Tyr anymore, so she thanks Basto before pulling Karl off the ship, causing him to fall into the mouth of a monstrous kraken. After the battle finally settles, Basto and Vale begin gathering the defeated mercenaries scattered across the deck. One by one, the duo drags them together and binds them with thick ropes. Suddenly, one of them desperately begs Basto, claiming they didn't want to do such things to him. Annoyed, Vale orders him to shut his mouth, threatening to turn him into minced meat if he keeps yapping. Not long after, Tyr casually reveals the route they will take on the way back and explains how the monsters lose their strength when they touch the current. According to her, the monsters become her minions once they lose their lives. Watching Tyr casually creating magic stones with a villainous smile, the prisoners freak out, and Vale mutters under his breath that she's a maniac. While Basto continues to tie up the prisoners on the ship, Marianne argues with her sons at the shore because of their resolution. To her shock, Raoul calmly states that he intends to resume sword training, and Enzo nods in agreement, supporting the plan without hesitation. Marianne immediately protests, reminding them why they left the Night Order and moved to Pearl City in the first place. Ever since their father died, the twins had been struggling with grief, and she brought them there to protect them. However, Raoul calmly tells her that they did not abandon the Night Order because of their father's death, and his statement leaves Marianne completely stunned. In the past, Marianne's mother sat with the twins at the dining table and spoke to them privately. Hoping that her grandsons would not end up dying like their father, she gently persuaded them to step away from the Night Order with the intention of saving Marianne from despair. After hearing her heartfelt request, Raoul and Enzo reluctantly played along, and after they left the Night Order, their mother became happier. Back in the present, Enzo explains how they shared the same fear their grandma had back then. As he speaks, Marianne slowly realizes her children are right. Raoul gently adds that they do not resent her, nor did they drop the sword because of her. Tears fill her eyes as she reflects on how much the twins resemble their father in both character and resolve. During the months after the tragedy, she often wondered if they had lost their motivation because they stopped training with their swords. She chose not to pressure them to keep striving, believing it was better to let them be. Now she begins to question whether their father would be disappointed in the way she handled everything. Suddenly, Marianne burst into tears, saying how she burdened them with anxiety instead of supporting them. Raoul gently takes her hand and assures her that simply being with them is already more than enough support. Enzo steps closer and hugs her from behind, explaining that they stopped training because they hoped that avoiding the sword might make everything better, but unfortunately it didn't work out. Shortly after, Marianne asks if they will be joining the Holy Knight Order, but to her surprise, the twins reveal their intention to join Agavert instead. Shocked, Marianne questions the decision, and Enzo decides to tell her how his father lost his life at the edge of the Order. Back then, when 4 units banded together to attack a large magic stone, a smaller one spawned close by in a residential area. However, this area was outside the Order's borders, and it was difficult to get permission to attack the small magic stone because the Holy Knights are forces of the Imperial family and the Church. Their father insisted on destroying the stone before it could harm civilians, and while the higher-ups agreed with his judgment, the Imperial family denied the request. Without Imperial support, their father fought without proper backup. In addition, Enzo talks about the slow response to the magic stone that appeared in Pearl City that day. Compared to that hesitation, the actions of Agavert mercenaries showed far greater resolve. In the twins' eyes, mercenaries now appear holier than the Holy Knights themselves. Hearing this, Marianne admits that they might be right while comparing Tyr's necromancy to a holy power. Not long after, the ship carrying the mercenaries returns to the shore of Pearl City. Citizens gather along the coastline as the infamous necromancer king and crew approach the harbor. When the crew disembarks, the people begin thanking the mercenaries for protecting them. However, Nordics politely asks the crowd to step back, explaining that Tyr needs time to recover. Tyr initially insists she feels fine, but she soon notices small side effects. Basto immediately lectures her about mana exhaustion and advises her to get some rest. Seeing the opportunity, Marianne formally invites the entire crew to a meeting at the administration office. As the governor of Pearl City, she wishes to personally thank them for their actions and properly recognize their efforts. Upon hearing Marianne's invitation, Tyr becomes visibly excited because she seems like a governor who repays kindness. The other members of Agavert agree, and as they leave, the gathered citizens continue cheering and thanking them loudly. The admiration makes Tyr feel strangely warm inside. While listening to the people express their gratitude, she suddenly remembers her father. She quietly resolves that if she can protect strangers like this, then she will definitely protect him too. At the open sea, which is before the central continent, Tessiton stands on the deck of a large ship while staring absent-mindedly at the horizon. He recalls the strange moment when a little girl happily called him father and burst into tears upon seeing him. Confused, Tessiton jokingly asks Alaric if he has a secret child somewhere, but Alaric wonders what is up with him. Tessiton agrees that he is chatting nonsense, since their mercenary group is made up of people who have nowhere else to go. Still, he keeps thinking about her unfamiliar voice and tear-streaked face. He worries about her safety on the harbor and walks into the cabin to borrow a communicator. The sailor instantly recognizes him as the leader of Travaga and politely explains the need for him to inform the imperial family before making requests to Pearl City's governor. Seeing the urgency in Tessiton's expression, the sailor grants him access, and Tessiton reluctantly agrees to play along even though he hates contacting the imperial family. While he is at it, the sailor casually asks if Tessiton has heard about the Necromancy King and tells him about the Agavert mercenary group's visit to Pearl City. According to the information he received from the youngest sailor aboard the harbor ships, the mysterious Necromancer King is actually a little girl. As the sailor continues describing Tyr's appearance exactly as it was reported to him, Tessiton freezes in disbelief. He drops the communicator and the information he got through the grapevine at a pub resurfaces in his memory. Thinking deeply, Tessiton realizes that he has been completely played. Meanwhile, back in Pearl City, Tyr is fast asleep, resting peacefully, while the other members of Agavert meet with the governor's sons in the reception room inside the administration office. Raoul and Enzo try to convince them to allow them to join the group, claiming that there is more to them than meets the eye. Without hesitation, Vale reiterates how they were useless at the sea battle the previous day, but Raoul insists. He remembers how amazing Vale's skills were during the ordeal and holds back his urge to become his student. On the other hand, Enzo recognizes Basto's abilities and hopes to learn from him. The twins ask if the leader does not want to meet with them since they are nothing in her eyes, but the group members know that the 4-year-old Tyr needs rest too. Suddenly, Vale claims to be the Necromancer King's favorite, but Basto and Nordics also chip in on the reasons why they all think they are Tyr's favorite. The twins watch them bicker back and forth on the subject, and they conclude that Tyr is a great mage because skilled mercenaries are arguing over her favor. While all of this unfolds, Tyr's mind drifts into a strange dream. In that quiet space, the voices of her companions seem to echo faintly, pestering her even in her sleep. As she slowly opens her eyes, she sees a strange being by her bedside. The sea god, Saradine, introduces herself and apologizes for disturbing her sleep. After thanking Tyr, she explains how Tyr took her out of the magic stone's trap. But after thinking deeply, Tyr says there was no one there when she attacked the stone. To her astonishment, Saradine claims she could not see her because she was the magic stone itself. With that revelation, Saradine begins explaining her true origin. She tells Tyr that long ago she existed as a spirit-like being who ruled over the Western Ocean as its Sea King. Shocked, Tyr recalls the spirits in Hyunwoo's game and how his older brother used to buy him new skins every day. After Tyr accepts that spirits truly exist in this world, Saradine calmly explains the source of their powers, which govern natural forces. However, the mother tree suddenly lost its powers and turned into a magic stone. Tyr inquires about the cause and other information, but Saradine has to leave because it is difficult to manifest for that long. Before leaving, Saradine briefs her about the consequences of the mother tree's decaying roots. As their conversation nears its end, Saradine forms a bracelet and gives it to Tyr. She reveals that it is called the Bracelet of Oblivion, created from her own essence as the Sea King. When worn, it allows the user to erase specific memories from someone simply by touching them with the hand wearing the bracelet. Tyr's eyes sparkle with excitement. She celebrates the legendary Tyr item she just received, and Saradine hopes it will be of use to her. Before she completely disappears, Saradine claims that the spirit in Tyr's bag will help her find the person she is searching for, but Saradine disappears before she can reveal more details. Stunned, Tyr slowly realizes that Kamang is not a puppetmon, but a spirit that can lead her to her father. Later that day, Tyr writes down her plans, which involve finding her father in his homeland, researching Kamang's identity, and the truth about magic stones. Thinking deeply about the second task, Tyr imagines the things Saradine told her earlier and wonders if all magic stones are spirits. Unable to verify this, she decides not to jump to a conclusion because the other magic stones she attacked were empty. With that, she includes another task in her journal, which is to find the mother tree and investigate the other magic stones. While staring at the entries in her journal, Tyr suddenly drifts into memories of her kindergarten days. For a brief moment, she wishes she could return to that simple life. Even though she likes Basto, Vale, and Nordics, she still misses her kindergarten teachers and the friends she used to play with. Soon, her stomach begins to growl. Feeling hungry, Tyr decides to meet the others so they can go get food at the administrative office. She bursts out of her room without thinking, and immediately hugs Vale's leg like an excited child. While cheerfully talking about magic stones, she suddenly notices their shocked faces. Turning around, she realizes the governor's sons, Raoul and Enzo, are in the room. At that moment, she realizes that she forgot to keep up the Necromancer King persona. Before the situation gets worse, Vale quickly scoops Tyr into his arms and orders the twins to stay put. He rushes back to Tyr's room, with Basto and Nordics following close behind. Enzo and Raoul freeze in disbelief as they watch everything unfold, and after a brief discussion, they realize that the Necromancer King is a cute little child. Inside the room, Tyr bursts into tears and blames herself severely for ruining everything. The three mercenaries stare at her helplessly, unsure how to respond. Since they did not expect this outcome, Vale, Basto, and Nordics think about a way to keep Tyr's exposure to a minimum. Basto notes that it is not Tyr's fault and wonders how they can win the governor's sons over. Meanwhile, Tyr imagines the worst possible outcome. If Raoul and Enzo spread the news, people will condemn them for forcing a 4-year-old to work as a mercenary and their entire group can be disbanded. Tyr thinks about a solution because she will not be able to find her father if that happens. Suddenly, she remembers the bracelet of oblivion she got from Saradine and decides to try it out. She suggests erasing the twins' memories, but the idea shocks the others. Upon hearing this, Vale freaks out and completely shuts down the idea. He lectures Tyr, claiming she is too young to do the absurd things mercenaries do. Realizing that Tyr has witnessed way too much violence for her age, Basto sighs heavily. However, Tyr insists on trying out the new power, and Vale swiftly grabs her before she exits the room. Vale tries to talk some sense into her, but she squirms and wiggles in his arms, trying to break free so she can go after Raoul and Enzo. Not long after, Vale declares bluntly that he will not let Tyr become a murderer, and she immediately stops struggling. Frozen in confusion, Tyr asks what he is talking about, and to their astonishment, they realize that they misunderstood her. Tyr briefs them about her meeting with the Sea King and the bracelet of oblivion she acquired. Vale summarizes it to make sense out of her story. Tyr describes how Saradin looks, and Vale suddenly remembers what Nordics mentioned some time ago. Coincidentally, Basto also remembers it and reveals that the blessing of God on Pearl City is from Saradin. Without hesitation, Nordics confirms that she is the local god of Pearl City, and after careful consideration, he concludes that Tyr found a relic. These relics can be found during Magic Stone sieges, when the loot isn't monster core. However, Nordics adds that mercenary groups are not allowed to keep these relics for themselves. With that explanation, Vale realizes that the higher-ups will want to take it from Tyr. He recalls an incident where the church took a relic that the Holy Knight Order found, and Nordics adds another example. He narrates how the Travaga group, the only mercenary group in history known to find a relic, voluntarily handed it over to the church. Basto guesses that the church pressured Travaga into giving it up. After hearing all of this, Tyr suggests erasing the twins' memories, but Vale reveals that they want to join Agavert. He then proposes that they accept them and let them know Tyr's identity however they want. Consequently, if they decide to leave the group later, they can erase their memories then. This way, they can grow their group and prevent rumors from spreading. Still visibly uneasy, Tyr wonders what will happen if they secretly run away. Vale admits how they have been working less because of Tyr's bone friends, and Basto reassures her that they are capable enough to notice someone trying to sneak out. After hearing their confidence, Tyr finally relaxes and agrees to follow the plan. Moments later, the group returns to the reception room inside the administrative office and sits down with Raoul and Enzo. After some explanations, the twins take notes of Tyr's early awakening, her dark attributes, and the reasons the public must know about her. In addition, the twins also talk about the conditional spell they were told about, which ensures that Tyr's identity will not be revealed. Vale then recalls their earlier experiment with the bracelet. During testing, they discovered that only Tyr can activate its power. Furthermore, instead of instantly erasing memories, she can place conditions that trigger the magic later. Realizing the potential of such relics, Vale finally understands why the church is obsessed with collecting them. After explaining everything, Basto asks the twins whether they are willing to accept the condition. Vale adds pressure by telling them to think very carefully before answering. The ominous aura he exudes worries Tyr since he looks like the bad guy. Without hesitation, Raoul and Enzo accept the condition, and Vale asks Tyr to do her thing. Following that, Tyr holds Raoul's hand and immediately enters his memories. She quickly locates his memories that involve her and sets the condition according to Vale and Basto's earlier suggestion. Presumably, the moment he hates Tyr or leaves Agavert, he will forget everything about her true identity. When the spell finishes, Raoul looks normal and says he does not feel any different. Enzo then asks Tyr to cast the same spell on him as well. Before Tyr can proceed, Vale asks her to place the condition on him, saying it would serve as insurance even though he has no intention of leaving Agavert. Basto immediately agrees and asks for the same treatment. Seeing their sincerity, Tyr decides to make it their eternal comradeship pledge. However, she looks around the room and realizes that Nordics is nowhere to be found. Worry begins to creep into her mind because he was just there moments ago. The next day, Nordics quietly visits Tyr's room and finds her sitting comfortably on the bed while munching on a plate of desserts. When she notices him, Tyr immediately asks where he went the day before. Instead of answering directly, Nordics immediately suggests telling Marianne about her identity because her power is too great to be hidden forever. He adds that the church will start researching her once they discover her relic, and she will not be able to protect herself once the church and imperial family focus their attention on her. To help her understand the danger, Nordics uses a Doraemon reference as an example, and Tyr talks about how the legendary Doraemon makes people stronger. To her astonishment, Nordics reveals that someone might treat her like a puppet. Confused, Tyr asks how it is possible since she is not a puppetmon, and he begins to list the other possibilities. Using scenarios like hostages, hypnosis, and drugs, Nordics asks if she is confident of stopping those herself. Seeing her hesitation, Nordics gently suggests getting help from House Wavril. At the governor's office in the administration building, Marianne meets with Tyr and asks what she wanted to tell her. After the briefing, Marianne notes that Tyr cast conditional magic on her group members and her intention to keep her identity hidden till she finds her father. Without hesitation, Marianne grabs her hands and agrees to support her. She decides to do so behind the scenes and also take Tyr as her adopted daughter since they are now in the same boat. Hearing this, the words awaken a flood of memories from Tyr's kindergarten days. She remembers the warmth of adults who cared for her and the simple happiness she once knew. Overwhelmed by emotion, tears begin forming in her eyes. Marianne gently praises Tyr for handling such enormous burdens at such a young age and promises to support her from now on. Tyr finally relaxes and begins complaining about things the way a normal child would. Marianne laughs softly and plays along like a proper mother comforting her daughter. During their conversation, Marianne admits that she had been mentally preparing herself to send her sons back into battle someday. Now that Raoul and Enzo have joined Tyr's crew, she feels relieved. Seeing Marianne's genuine feelings, Tyr promises to take care of her sons, and Marianne thanks her sincerely. That evening, Tyr lies quietly on her bed and reflects on everything that happened. She realizes that Nordics was right to encourage her to reveal the truth to Marianne. Clutching her pendant, Tyr silently wishes she could grow stronger. In her heart, she even hopes that magic stones would disappear from the world entirely so people like Basto and Marianne would never have to feel sad again. With that thought, she slowly drifts off to sleep. A few days later, Tyr and the Agavert crew gather outside the city as they prepare to depart. The group is amazed by the luxurious carriage and supplies provided by Marianne. She explains that Pearl City still owes Tyr far more than this small gesture. While the group members board the carriage, Marianne takes a moment to speak with her sons and asks about their trip. Raoul discloses their destination and their intention to get a sword at the weapons district. The moment she hears that, Marianne hurries inside, leaving Raoul and Enzo confused. Shortly after, she returns with her husband's sword. Since this sword contains his will, she decides to give it to Raoul because he is left-handed like his father. Afterwards, the brothers say their goodbyes to their mother and leave. As the carriage heads out, Tyr and Marianne wave to each other, and Tyr promises to visit again. Later that day, Marianne returns to her office and begins to draft a letter. Apparently, she is inquiring about a holy knight who made a great name for himself in the past. In the letter, she adds some physical features of the person in question. He has black hair and eyes that are a mix of green and brown. Marianne also includes his overly serious but quiet behavior and his unusual name, Kim Young-soo. Coincidentally, the Travaga group takes down the monsters they encounter along the way, and Tessiton laughs hysterically while cutting them down. On the other hand, Marianne's letter reaches the intended parties, and a noblewoman wonders what it is about. At the Agavert group's end, Enzo reads the letter and thinks deeply because he cannot recall any Kim Young-soo in the Holy Knight Order.